Welcome to our webinar today. It's Talking Tech with Legal IT Insider. I'm your host, Caroline Hill, and we're here to discuss GenAI use cases with Thomson Reuters, CoCounsel and Acuity Law. Got an amazing panel. We are looking at the fact GenAI is set to change the way law firms operate. We all know that, but it's noisy. There's lots of half-baked promises. It's a case of who and what do you listen to. And what's really cool about this webinar today is that we have both Thomson Reuters and a client, Acuity, who is in some way along the journey of selecting, adopting CoCounsel, and they're here to give us a very honest account of their experiences in terms of what their selection looked like, some of the challenges, conversations around ROI, and the kind of warts and all conversation, which I'm really grateful to everybody here for. So just in terms of our speakers, we have Ben Firth, who is Director of Sales and Customer Success at Thomson Reuters. Ben has over 2 decades of legal tech experience, almost 7 of which have been with Thomson Reuters. He was previously Head of Customer Success at HiQ, which was acquired by TR in 2018. And before that, he was Head of Sales at Doc Auto. He's held roles at companies such as Phoenix Business Solutions and Ticket. Hi, Ben.
Hi, how are you doing?
You're good. We've got Henry Ives, who's a solution consultant at Thomson Reuters. He's disgustingly less old than me, and he's been at Thomson Reuters for just over 3 years. Started out as sales development rep and has moved to become an associate solution consultant and now solution consultant, working with HiQ, Contract Express, Doc Auto and CoCounsel. Before TR, he worked in the insurance sector, and Henry will be giving us a 10-minute demo at the end. Hi, Henry.
Hi, everyone.
Nice to have you here. From Acuity, we have Rob Heaton, who is operations. I said you're operations director, but you're actually COO, aren't you, Rob?
No, it's operations director.
It's operations director.
I don't update my LinkedIn.
Okay, operations director. Yeah. I had it right. So he's a long pedigree in working for innovative law firms, starting out as legal manager at Eversheds and head of operations at organisations like New Law Solicitors, Cooperative Legal Services and Carbon Law Partners. Nice to see you, Rob.
Hello, nice to see you.
And last but very much not least, Claire Cooper is Business Transformation Lead at Acuity. Claire's a qualified solicitor. She's been leading the deployment of CoCounsel and involved in all of those conversations I just talked about briefly around ROI, the impact on revenue, and many more topics that we're going to cover today. And Claire has worked at organisations that include the Co-op and Clifford Chance, as well as for vendors including such as InfoTrack and other organisations outside of legal, if that's such a thing that exists. Hi, Claire.
Good morning, all. Thank you very much, Caroline, for the intro.
Thanks so much for joining me. So as I said before, if you've just joined enable your chat, we're going to take questions as we go. The format, we're going to start off, Ben's going to talk us through evaluating legal generative AI and give us a 5-minute talk on the landscape. So understanding AI in the legal industry and a practical evaluation frameworks and key criteria for assessing GenAI tools. I have to say, all credit to Ben, he's been encouraging this very frank conversation, so it's really good to see. I think something that we want to see more of in the industry as people start to adopt GenAI more and need these kind of learning experiences that we're having today. We're going to be looking at the experience of Acuity from the beginning, when they began the CoCounsel trial. We're going to be looking at what steps firms need to tick off as they go, how firms are approaching clients. We'll probably get a more holistic view of that from Ben. What adoption has been like, what the challenges are, what success looks like, how they're addressing the challenges around revenue model, what the ROI is so far, and having a look at how Acuity and Thomson Reuters have been working in partnership, which for me is absolutely key, that word partnership, because it's not just about the tech. And then last but not least, we're going to have a demo of CoCounsel from Henry and any questions from you in the audience. So if I can ask you, Ben, to kick us off with your understanding of the market.
Yeah, look, thanks very much. That's a huge agenda and the clock is ticking, Caroline. So we're all wearing trainers this morning. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully this will come through fine. Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Ben Firth, like Karen was saying, Director of Customer Success and Sales at TR. And ultimately, my job is to make sure that whoever invests in TR gets the best out of that from an experience and investment perspective. We've got loads to cover today with Acuity, but what I thought we would do is give people a bit of a 50,000-foot view of the market and the landscape, and hopefully that will eke out more of a conversation as we go into that next phase, Caroline. So AI in legal is a crazy space right now. It is so busy. We've got point solutions in the market, offering a wide range of experiences in that legal space, AI space, sorry. And then you've got also lots of other already existing legal tech launching AI capabilities into their stack as well. So it's a really exciting time. But if we just take a sort of a step backwards and look at the usage over the last sort of 12 months of where we started last year and into this year, if everybody kind of took their brains back a year ago, we were all in this kind of like haze of understanding what AI was, and we were learning almost hour by hour, day by day, and we were trying to really pick this knowledge sort of up as we went. But if we looked at today with some of the reports that we've done, I just thought it'd be really interesting to show you where we sit, or where we see the market sitting, and maybe individually who people on the audience might resonate with some of this. So what we found was 28% of law firms are already using AI in a capacity. And we'll delve into what that means in terms of looks like into products. And then we're seeing 14% are planning to use it, and 36% were saying we're considering whether to use it or not. And so one thing I would say is that we had this surge of initial law firms really buying into it, but we're still seeing in the market a lot of strategy formulation coming in. If we look at the growth between 2024 to 2025, you can see that we've had a step up. We've had an increase of usage, which is naturally going to happen anyway, as law firms evolve and they start to take this forward. But really positive signs that we are starting to move the dial in terms of usage across the board. It would be worth noting that the row below corporate legal, just so people are aware, the corporate legal teams are really on the law firm's heels now, and you guys might be seeing that in terms of your engagements with corporate legal departments, their interest in AI, their adoption of AI. It's really on the heel of the law firm, whereas traditionally in the legal tech space, the corporates were quite a way back in terms of that adoption and usage. If we just move on to something else that's quite interesting around the adoption, about where it's being used. So what we found out was that about 35% of firms are already using basically open source ChatGPT and other options. So that was the one that's it's freely available pretty much, or certainly a low value entry point. But 35% of respondents are already using that. About 20% are already using some sort of paid service, CoCounsel, for example, and then also about 12% are already investing into what I would call their own proprietary systems. And we are starting to see a bit of a change where maybe some of the larger firms with a real investment in their tech stack are exploring that own proprietary generative AI space. Not a great deal, but we are starting to see that move. What I thought was really interesting, if I just take the second section down, well, the third or fourth row down there, about firms, departments with no plans. Ironically, similar numbers to the top level here. About 30% are saying, well, we don't really plan on using open source ChatGPT. About 20% saying we don't really plan on using, at the moment, a paid service. And majority was saying, well, we're not even going to be using proprietary. So what I would extract from this information is that there is this early adopter group, but there's a really good, a big, larger space of law firms in the industry, UK-wide, who are still in this formulation period where they're kind of figuring it out still, and they're taking guidance and they're taking ideas, they may be testing, they may be looking at things, but it shows positive signs that we're going to start to move up the dials in terms of usage and adoption. And I would really be saying into next year, if we look at the same data, it'll be even further ahead, obviously on the top row, about already in use, 35%, maybe 40, 50 and beyond. In terms of the frequency, though, for the people who have invested in that tech or thinking about it, this is also something that was really interesting. The middle section's law firms. We're really concentrating on the audience today. About 12% of respondents said they're using AI multiple times in the day. And those are the keen beans, the thrusters, the ones who think it's going to really change their day-to-day activity at this early stage in the tech stack. But you can see there in the middle there, you've got more of a group of people who are using it sort of weekly. And I would call those the tinkers, the people who have it. Maybe the firm's invested in it. They're opening the access up to the legal tech area of AI. And they're either not got the direction or they're not got the reasons. They're still learning in that space. And that's quite common, I would say, when I get to speak to law firms at the moment. They're really starting to see a divide in the workforce. And actually, when we talk about strategy, and maybe Acuity might come on, we'll start to talk about this. There is this real divide of the ones who really want to go fast, get it done, really adopt it. And the education piece is really focusing around that, the group of, say, 36%ers who are using it weekly. We want to try and bring that usage up in some ways. And that's a real focus for lots of law firms at the moment. And just sort of finally, really, as we sort of draw into a bit more of a conversation, it's really good to note that the use cases. So the top three across the industry that we're seeing at the moment is document review, legal research, and document summarization. These are the most easily accessible and easy to kind of, let's say, get up and use within pretty much any GenAI platform. But what we're also seeing down at the lower end of this table is this bubbling up of new use cases. And this is really exciting for us as let's say, a tech vendor and as a legal tech advisor in the market. We're starting to see the surgence of these bubbling up use cases, different departments using GenAI within the law firm. You see marketing in there, business development, and these are all within that law firm space. So that's really exciting for me personally, as we start to bring new ideas and new options into that GenAI space. But obviously 77% are still using it for that really good review, because ultimately that is a really powerful tool set within pretty much every GenAI platform in the market. So I thought, Caroline, this would be a really good place to sort of set the scene for the next phase of how we go about really digging into the detail with Acuity.
Thanks, Ben. And we'll come back to some use cases from
absolutely
Acuity's perspective. Thank you for that. So great. So then coming over to you, Claire and Rob, I like the fact we all laughed at the word tinkers. It'd be interesting to come on to your experience of how people have been, your own experience internally. But so first of all, talk a bit more about Acuity Law. So can you give us a high-level introduction? A lot of people may not really know the firm. So can you give us an introduction to the firm and perhaps what problem you were trying to solve for when you first started looking at CoCounsel? Sure.
I'll pick that one up. So Acuity Law has been around for about 25 years, but has gone through reasonably steep growth over the last 5. We've got about 125 lawyers, 7 offices across the UK, about 17 mil turnover. We're a commercial firm, so main areas are corporate, commercial, real estate, dispute resolution, and employment. So that's the real core of what we do. So I guess in terms of the driver towards this, thinking about kind of where this all kicked off, and ChatGPT has been around for quite a long time now. And when that kicked off, probably about 2 years ago, we started thinking, right, okay, there's a driver from the board. We've got to get on this train, go out there, get us some AI. And that's obviously the wrong way to think about it. It's what problems are we trying to solve? So it was like stepping back and thinking, right, okay, well, we've got multiple departments. They've all got specific areas that they have issues with, or areas that could be improved. And at that time, and probably still is, the market's quite fragmented in terms of different AI solutions. So we started to go out and have a look at different bits of software. We were looking at contract review software, document automation, various bits and bobs, and started to have those conversations. And it was about probably 18 months ago, we started to have conversation with Thomson Reuters around document intelligence, particularly around contract review. And at that point, it coincided with CoCounsel being in development, and that being an opportunity for us to look at. absolutely, it ticked a lot of the boxes for the various different practice areas and their particular issues that they were experiencing. So that's really what drove us towards looking with Thomson Reuters and CoCounsel, and that being really early stages in terms of their development of it. As a firm, being our particular size as well, what do you do? I mean, what's your strategy? You can either look at thinking, why can we develop our own? We're not big enough for that. We don't have the resources. We don't have the budget. We'd love to look at individual little solutions. That brings its own problems with having an inflated tech stack with lots of different vendors to manage, lots of different solutions, different change management programs to try and get this adopted. So the perfect solution for us, the size of business that we are, the solutions that and skills that CoCounsel brings with it was like the obvious solution for us. So that's kind of what drove us into the arms of Thomson Reuters and CoCounsel.
Makes a lot of sense. So you're avoiding, as a smaller type firm, having to go to multiple vendors, which I think firms are struggling with. It's interesting you say about get us some AI, and that you normally start with a problem. I feel like GenAI has turned that a little bit on its head, that people are now going, I do need to get myself some GenAI. Whereas before we would strongly say, do not think about this, just think about what problem you're trying to solve. I do actually think that this has kind of turned this a little bit on its head. And as Ben was saying, in terms of like where people are at, I feel like you've got to be somewhere now. I think if you're not doing anything, then you probably should be cause for concern. So I think it's fascinating how much it's turned it on its head.
Yeah, I think at that time, and there was a question of, is the AI solving a problem? Mm-hmm. Now I think any problem you've got, and AI generally has a solution for it.
Yeah.
So rather than just going for AI as a kind of headline, it's AI will provide a solution to most problems in practice areas.
Yeah. What steps did you have to effectively tick off? You're more forward-thinking firm. You went through a selection process, obviously, with Thomson Reuters and CoCounsel coming out on top. What were the sort of key steps that you or firms have to tick off, do you think, before you make a decision about adopting this kind of system?
Well, from a board level, is you obviously have to have commitment from a board level that this is a significant investment, and it's not just the investment in licenses. You're talking about investment in the whole adoption and change management piece.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say, as a firm, we've had plenty of failures when it's come to tech adoption in the past. It's been throw some tech at the the practice areas, see what sticks, and a lot of it hasn't. So this is it's getting that understanding from the board level, and then the senior partners and all the way down, that first and foremost, this is a tool to help, but this is a long-term investment. This is not a switch it on, everything's perfect. There's a lot of learning about how we do things, the way in which we approach things that we need to change to get the most out of the tech. And Claire, I know you probably got a lot to say on that, because you've been leading that kind of change management piece more than I have.
From my perspective, I came into this journey a little bit later. So I've only been with Acuity Law for a year. So I kind of came in with, as Caroline was referring to, kind of external industry perspectives, where AI is much more intrinsic to the day-to-day. There's kind of interoperability between your tech stack, and there's a different kind of drive towards revenue expectations. And so kind of landed inside Acuity Law. We'd chosen CoCounsel as our kind of initial test, and needed to get to work on the program and how we were going to kind of test and trial. But then I think we kind of knew that we trusted Thomson Reuters, and this was a case of running the tests, checking that the data made sense, and then really kind of getting into a position to start onboarding. So we've approached this with kind of a two-pronged attack, which is onboarding and embedding, and then the actual change transformation piece, which is both kind of process-led, but also behavioural, cultural, really trying to get that top down, bottom up, and making sure that we just get everybody aligned as quickly as possible. And what Ben was saying earlier was really interesting about that differentiation between usage levels. And I think our firm definitely sits somewhere between daily and weekly, with a couple of outliers on the monthly side of things.
Yeah.
And part of kind of the next stage of what we're doing now is deciding, how do we structure our retrospective training sessions? So how do we build out the advocates that we've already got to really uplift all of the best practice that we have? We've done a lot of work with Henry. I mean, the team at TR have been amazing. I mean, it really has been a partnership throughout. But now we're kind of moving into a space of the lawyers want to run a day in the life of using CoCounsel. That's brilliant, right? Because now we're getting to a stage where they see it as the option that they use day to day. And it's not all us driving the behavior and the expectations. And it's also kind of pushed us into other areas. So for example, now we're really kind of process mapping, we're really getting into best practice knowledge management. So it's kind of really started to gain real traction, which is nice, because as Ben was saying, you know, sometimes with law firms you get that piecemeal approach, but we seem to be going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think, Claire, just to help, so on that, so I would say with tech like this, there's two challenges. Obviously the technical, you know, the testing and the export, the results, but the big thing for us has been trust. We are having to reset the dial on trust. And when we talk to clients, the usage of it is the easy bit, right? Actually using this tech is relatively straightforward. It's giving that sort of trust and that sort of hand over the shoulder to say, guys, stick with me. This tech is going to help you. You've just got to keep using it and take the direction I'm giving you. And I know culturally that's a big thing at law firms. And we are seeing in the market a very much a divide, divide's not the right word, but a segmentation of how law firms are approaching the different user groups within law firms as well. The Gen Zs, the baby boomers, and their impressions and interpretations of this tech are very different. I'll give you an example. The Gen Z group, they're very socially aware about security and ethical usage and is it right to use it, but they're happy to use it and they want to go, and they feel really pulled back with the policies and procedures, but they still think about it. Whereas the baby boomers, that adoption is more of a usage challenge. They're a bit confused about it. They're saying, well, I've been doing this perfectly well for the last 30 years. Like, why do I need this? And so the education piece about adoption changes really quickly. And I know that law firms like you guys are really thinking about that with your adoption challenges and your growth, but clearly it's working, right? Because you just said it. You're now the guys are coming to you, aren't they, and saying, hey, I want more of this.
Yeah,
well,
no,
what has the adoption been like? Sorry to interrupt you, Claire. So what has before we sort of dive into that, what has the adoption been like? So it's obviously been good. Have you sort of got some, you know, sort of percentages or whatever you can share with us?
Yeah. So I think it's worth just kind of taking a slight step back and talking through like what Ben was saying there. And we've had the ability to build trust internally and gain that momentum. So because we started way back in October with a trial, which was just over a week, lots of training, lots of interaction with the TR team, lots of incentives to drive feedback, you know, and actual usage and building out use cases. And then we continued that program of training and just lots of communications and having an open door policy, right, where you can just come and ask us anything. It could be, I don't get it. Why is it doing this? You know, and at the beginning, when it was version 1.0, we're in a very different space to today. But they have seen that change. And that has been exponentially valuable for us as a team, because when we got to 2.0 trial, which was in January, they were coming to us and going, can't believe how different this is. Like, I can't believe the shift in what we can do today and compared to what we were doing last time. And so all of that kind of driver and that really seeing the challenges change and also the tech mature has been significantly useful for us. And again, we were one of the first to use drafting, which was kind of end of Jan, beginning of February. And it was very similar. You know, at first it was, I would almost say, a beta release. It was very early stage tech, you know, and some things worked and other things were a bit tricky and you had to kind of work your way around things. But again, with TR support, I mean, I think I've got Henry on like speed dial. So the team there have been amazing with really supporting us through this, because it does have to be a partnership. And then what's happened is we've got these super users now who've become our tech champions, and they are driving all the conversations that we can't. They're doing the conversations in the room where somebody's a little bit hesitant or not sure, and they can fill those gaps for us. When it comes to data, I think we had a brilliant call. I was very pleased with it, Ben, a couple of weeks ago, where we did a quick analysis of our data, and I think we were at 70% utilization.
Yeah.
So although that there's obviously differentiations on what the definition of utilization is, we're in a good space, and I can see through all of the teams now regular logins. It might be more so weekly, and as you get to the kind of outliers, that might be monthly, but we're definitely in a space where it's all positive, you know, and it's in the
absolutely.
Right
And that's a great data point, 70%. And we often talk about habits, right? We're creatures of habits, aren't we? So the more you use it, the more you use it, right? So it's just a rolling experience. And then we like to get to people to the situation, not just with CoCounsel, but with things like HiQ, is we want your lawyers to be going, can I do this in CoCounsel? And that's great, because then you know you've launched, right? People are thinking in that way.
What
But it's
lesson?
also, sorry.
Oh, I tell you what, you two have.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I was having a conversation with a senior partner yesterday in the corporate team, and they've only just had their login. So we're kind of rolling cohort by cohort, not, you know, so we can piecemeal and stagger. And he was sat in the meeting with me, we're talking through playbooks, which is one of the newer drafting features. And he was like, so if I gave a trainee or a junior a contract and it was, you know, 5 p.m. and it was urgent and I needed them to get through first draft by, I don't know, sometimes the timelines are super tight, let's say 8 p.m. or I needed it for Monday to be ready. I can embed my knowledge and understanding, and they would have not only their interpretation of what it should be, but our learned kind of, I suppose, best practice. And I would have that. I wouldn't just have whatever they found in PLC, the various boilerplate clauses, you know, various. They would have a version of events that was much further down the line than if the training had just picked it up and kind of given it a go, right? And that's where you really start to get the senior people in, because it's not just the heavy lifting, it's the, oh, I can really save some of my own headspace here. And it helps them free up their time strategically, but also all the various other expectations that are on partners, whether that's business development, you know, people management, the works. And so that is where we're really starting to find traction, where we can see that there's going to be long term, you know, they're really kind of starting to see the horizon and what it's going to bring.
So of that 70%, so are you able to say what level of lawyers? You've talked about the challenges and the senior, I get it, you know, the senior lawyers saying, well, I've done this in the way that, and it's brilliant, you know, your insights in terms of how you start to get over that. What level of lawyers are using it? And perhaps also, while you're on the subject, how are you overcoming perhaps some of the danger zones that we're so familiar with around this types of tech?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, it is the more junior lawyers. If you took like a mass reading of what our data is telling us, it's associate down. And I think that's a lot because there's various benefits to them. One, they can start autonomously learning. Legal isn't what it used to be 15 years ago, where you sat with a partner and you learned everything about their day, and you had all of their phone calls and letters, you know, and you just really learned by sitting in the room. now they've been commoditized in a way where they are siloed and they have to kind of figure things out by themselves. And so this technology is actually allowing you to do that. So you can debate with this technology. I've done it. I've uploaded documents and said, tell me what I should change. And then I've argued with CoCounsel about those changes. So for them, that's a huge bonus. You know, the kind of that group of people are used to being online. They're used to a digital world. They're used to having that level of interaction. So it's a very natural thing for them to do. The partners tend to, at the moment, feel like it's more of a junior experience. But I mean, quite recently, one of our most senior partners, founder of Acuity Law, couldn't log in. We were having some technical difficulties. And she emailed me to say, I had to do it manually. And I'm like, why did I have to do it manually? You know, so it really is something that goes from trainees and paralegals right the way through to senior partners. It's kind of just finding that moment of, I suppose in tech terms, the aha moment or the delight, you know, that impact for them. And then they're away, you know, like they're more than happy to.
I think what would be worth just mentioning at that point, one of the reasons why, when we go back to that word trust, it's working quite successfully with us so far, is that the fundamental architecture behind CoCounsel is the fact that it is embedded in our practical law and Westlaw content. And that is a very powerful message to give to your lawyers. But also when you start to talk about AI with your clients, and that's another bit that, again, the legal industry we're so obsessed about keeping our lawyers happy right now. I think one of the next stages in this journey is going to be opening Pandora's box to your clients, right? And how do we manage that? How do we control it and govern it? And so the CoCounsel architecture, we're not going to get into the deep weeds of it right now. We just don't have the time. But the key message and the key part to it is it's embedded and it's wrapped around practical law content, Westlaw content, and that's a really powerful play within our own LLM. And that's something that comes up quite a lot. Is it, well, how does it give me the right advice? Well, we've got a team of practical law editors that work day and night in auditing and checking and writing and publishing, and that gets signed off and gets published and put into the LLM. And so suddenly we've got stuff to bounce off that is a highly respected data source in the industry. And that is something that we found when people start this journey and they start with maybe ChatGPT. And let's, you know, if we've been totally honest, ChatGPT will service some of those low-level requirements quite nicely, actually. But when you start to bring in a professional grade response that's required, you now need to think about pivoting to something more entrenched in a legal framework.
How do you internally, absolutely, but then in terms of the process around this and the fact that you still need to have those guardrails. I think you're absolutely can agree more, Ben, but you still need to have those guardrails. You still need to people to check. You probably always will. How do you create those guardrails and make sure that people are following the right processes internally?
Lots of repetition in our communications. And that's at all levels. So I'm quite lucky in that my direct report is Rachel Selleck, who's the lead partner here, and also the COLP. So from the beginning, she has been. They are checking their documents, Claire, right? They are checking all the outputs. They're doing what they need to be doing, and she's one of our strongest kind of internal advocates. And that's one of the things we're very lucky to have is our key stakeholders at exec level really understand that they need to get involved and people need to hear them, not only just with what they enjoy, but what challenges they've had and the guardrails. So we have kind of firm-wide drop-ins. Rachel attends those and always mentions, you know, if I don't get to it first, have you read your documents? We've got AI government policy that's on its way to the teams. And it's just every training session, every time, let's say I'm running a legal project management at the moment for a due deal. It's, again, just repeating. And I think sometimes you've just kind of got to get stuck in, you know, and you've got to acknowledge that this is so new that people are used to trusting tech in some respects, and there is like that kind of moment where humans also make mistakes. They would make mistakes even without the technology, so you've got to have a bit of bandwidth.
It's like with any new technology or any existing technology. So we've had the same with emails, haven't we? We've had the same over the years. We've had so many different evolutions, and it's just a case of explaining to people and explaining again. And we're still explaining with emails what you do and what you don't do, and you don't click on this.
This is procedures, yeah.
I think we're going to be explaining this for many more years to come. You know, this is, I think, it's an ongoing process.
I think firms are across the board. I would say from an agnostic perspective, we're hearing that regarding that guardrail process at law firms. I know that certain law firms will not let you access generative AI until you've passed an internal exam or you've had sign off, and so law firms are really investing in that governance and security aspect of Gen AI because of the what ifs, what if this happens, what if that happens, and it's liability and risk, right? So we are seeing that more and more. I've also heard on the wind that certain firms are bringing in entry exams to trainees and new starters to understand the level that they're starting at within the Gen AI space. So that is really interesting as we start to shape the next generation of fee earners as they're coming in through the door for you guys and other law firms.
Yeah, I should add, sorry, to that. I was going to say we were going to build out a training program, but every time we get started, you guys change the features. So
we'll hold off because we've got a new version coming in the summer, which is even better.
It's a huge plus, but yeah, from an internal perspective, we're trying to kind of find that right moment to do it.
Yeah, fair.
Well,
I'll take note. Slow down.
I've got a feeling time is just going so quick because we've still got to. We've got to make sure that we've got time for Henry. So I think I'm just going to talk about just real quick. Do your use cases accord with what Ben showed us at the beginning, roughly? Are you able to say? Does that match in terms of how
people take? Yeah, so we found from the very first trial, summarize and review documents because it's the heavy lifting piece. Timeline is also something that they really enjoy using. Research is something a little bit newer to us. We've got the PLC integration, so they're able to utilize that element of it, but it's not a strong use case at the moment. But I get the feeling once we really kind of drive home, and I know Henry's been a big component of trying to do this skill stacking to get to the stage where you do all the things that you need to do, really to kind of optimize our results. But give or take, that is roughly where we are. Yeah.
Brilliant. And then just in terms of, let's talk about revenue and ROI. I've got so much more I want to do, and I'll just and I want to come onto the board as well if we've got time in terms of getting that top-down approval. But let's talk about revenue and ROI. Can you talk about share some of those conversations? Let's talk about revenue first. There's obviously a fear around cannibalizing your own revenue. Let's face it. I think one of the things I was most excited about is these kind of candid conversations. To the extent that you can you share with us the types of conversations and in terms of how you're addressing that internally?
Rob, do you want to pick?
Yeah, it's a very live conversation at board level in terms of understanding how this is going to impact us, because I guess, and this does lean into ROI a little bit as well.
Yeah, is maybe take them both together.
Yeah, it's one of the major benefits of CoCounsel and AI generally is that it creates capacity, and it's what you do with that capacity that's going to make a real difference in terms of what benefits you get out of it. So if your utilization is low at the moment, and you bring in something that's going to improve that efficiency, well, your utilization gap is going to get worse. So how is that? Do you feed more work into that? Can you feed more work into that, or do you change the shape and structure of how the business is organized? Also, then when it comes into the whole revenue side of it is, and we're probably not at that stage yet. It's very live conversations, but we're still only 6 months in. And as we are only kind of launching this by tranche and by practice area, so it's going to take quite a while for us to filter all of this through. We will need to start looking at, right, okay, how are we going to change our pricing structures? Is it going to be more value-based pricing? Is it going to be more fixed fees? It's going to change the way that we approach billable hours. but it will have benefits where it, you know, reduces write-off potentially in areas where, you know, that can be more challenging, like in litigation where there's more challenges on costs. So there's lots of you know, there's lots of conversations around that. I think in terms of the data, and one of the things that was exposed for us, I think, in taking on CoCounsel in the first place is that the data that we've been capturing isn't tight enough for us to be able to really accurately measure what benefit this is delivering for us. And we'll be totally honest about that. We know that we're getting benefit from it. We know that this is adding value for us. But in terms of being precise on saying, right, we know it's giving us, you know, a return on investment of X, we're not there yet. You know, so that's kind of meshing that kind of revenue and ROI kind of question together.
I don't think it's fascinating. I think with back office use of GenAI, it's able to demonstrate ROI. You can show immediate cost savings. You can show that your problem is done quicker. You can show there's all those sort of. But with the business of law, I think it's possible to show immediate ROI. With the practice of law, I think there's going to be it has to be an acceptance that this is a longer journey, and that's not a reason just because you can't demonstrate. You can show all kinds of different metrics, but actually the ROI specifically is going to come down the line. And there's some really interesting books, you know, and sort of much smarter people than me that have written endlessly about this. And I think it's you know, something that you've just got to. It's a step-by-step process, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's, you know, that's absolutely recognised at board level. And I think in terms of looking at the steps before you take on something like CoCounsel, it is understanding that this is a long journey, that you will get benefits and incremental benefits as you go along. Being able to track them, absolutely, you'll get quick wins from it. But this is evolving technology as well, and it's a long-term game.
Yeah, 100%. Ben, what are you going to say?
Yeah, look, so we've seen, like you're saying, rapidly reduced write-offs. We've had a client said to us very recently that they think already they've saved about a third of time in reduction in time producing SPAs. So that kind of real run-of-the-mill output stuff, and they're already starting to see that data come back. The other part to it is that they're future-proofing. They're getting ahead with their clients. They're being able to use the platform to future-proof work, looking into the future on date ranges, clauses, changes, etc. So the clients are really enjoying that engagement. And if you think about return on investment, there's some kind of, it sounds a bit fluffy, but it kind of works. You know, if you're increasing your client's satisfaction with the service you're giving through this sort of technology, you know, there's chances of increased referrals, which will increase expansion of that law firm's book of business. Productivity increases will increase profitability increases, right? So there are some real good sort of steers of where people are thinking around using the platform. But also one thing as well is the elevation of service we're seeing. We had a client say to us that they're now freer to go deeper in their research and their investigational work because of the platform, which is giving their clients a better service, a more fuller service of what they're delivering. And so it's not about volume, it's about quality maybe. And so so there's so many different angles to think about this subject. And I think you're right, Caroline, is like the business of law, they're all about data and they stack their products in line, and they look at the cost and they look at the output, and that's really cool. But the lawyer is so fluid right now, trying to hold them down to control that revenue and align it to return is a real challenge. And I think you're right. Really intelligent people have made books. We're still learning day to day, but yeah.
Tell me real quick through. I was going to ask you at the beginning about the client, but we sort of have skipped all over the place. So just talk real quick through the client, so we don't lose the opportunity. One of the challenges you touched on in your introduction. So the clients I speak to are rapidly adopting GenAI. It's fascinating. They're also putting their law firms under pressure to use AI, but then they're also telling them that they can't use it. There's such a mishmash of there's a lot of contradictions. You know, how do you, perhaps with your overview, it's maybe slightly more difficult for Acuity to talk about their clients, but how do you see what works in terms of addressing what might be called the client problem?
So I guess first of all, and maybe Acuity might at least nod or acknowledge, is that I think the top two requests on a standard business tender are: what is your AI strategy, and what is your ESG policy? So those are the two areas that lots of corporate firms working with law firms, for example, are really diving into, and that's had a surge. The irony is ESG and AI eventually going to start to conflict each other with environmental challenges of AI, right? But let's not talk about it today. That's down the road. But I think that's certainly something that comes to mind. And the moment law firms, I understand it, and I'll be corrected, I'm sure, online, is no law firm is yet giving AI experiences into the hands of their clients, and they're being quite controlled with that message. They are acknowledging they're using AI to their clients, but it's not being done at scale or in anger just yet. Is that fair, Rob, would you say, from your side?
Absolutely. We're approaching this at the moment of, this is just another tool that lawyers use. And we're not being, we're not shouting from the rooftops that we're using this, that, or the other at the moment, because this is still very much a learning process for us. And it's like adopting any technology, any new tool in any industry, in any organization. You're going to want to know what it can do and understand the limitations of it and how that's going to change your business before you go too far too quickly.
I couldn't agree more with you. And actually, going back to the email point, it's actually about how firms, with any technology, it's about the governance, it's about the internal, messaging, it's about, there could be the things that can go wrong with all kinds of technology. So actually, I think there's a risk of us sort of focusing too much on GenAI, albeit that there are different risks now. Before we get to Henry, Rob, we've talked a lot about the board. We've touched on the board, and we've talked about how important it is to have that tone from the top. We've talked about a revenue and ROI conversation. Is there anything that we haven't talked about? Because in all of the conversations that I have, one of the big challenges is that lack of senior buy-in. To be honest with you, like I did a webinar just earlier this week where in the comments, people were saying we have a lack of senior adoption. And buying. Was there anything that you can share from a board perspective that has enabled you to sort of reach the position that perhaps other people haven't yet?
I think we're quite lucky. Claire's touched on this already. In all of our members of the senior board are still practicing lawyers. So they still understand, so there is a natural kind of interest in how work is done, and so it's a bit easier for you to kind of put in front of them a piece of software that will radically change how they operate and improve how everybody works, because they can immediately relate to it, rather than somebody, for instance, who hasn't actually done much legal work for the last 5 years and has been out there, generating business. I think you've got to be very honest about it. I think you've also got to explain that there's, this is a long-term investment, and that, I think, that could put a lot of boards off, because you need to know that this is not an instant turnaround where you can measure the ROI. But I think we've been quite lucky with our board. That the steer, as I said right at the outset, for us was, right, let's get on this AI train. And so it was then about finding, like, what's going to be the right solution for us, rather than just going around and trying everything and throwing lots of money at different solutions. It's about taking our time, getting on the right train. So it's been a bit easier with our board. I'll be honest, not all members of the board. I think it's fair to say that there's been one or two. One in particular cornered me in a kitchen and asked me if I could just make this AI stuff go away. I think it's a little bit late for that. I don't think that's in my power.
We all feel like that at times. And we're eating into Henry's time. So listen, if you've got questions, please do put them in the chat, and I'll ask them. Henry's very accomplished and has said that he'll take questions either as we go or sort of towards the end, but we are tight on time. So if I can hand over to you, Henry, and please do ask any questions in the chat in the time we have left. Over to you, Henry, for a demo.
Perfect. Thank you. Right, should be able to see my screen. So let's get started. So just a bit of background on this scenario that I've created. So we're acting for an influencer under this brand ambassador agreement. And this influencer, they have a large social media presence in the world of paddle. And they're sought after to endorse paddle products. And the company they're under agreement with manufactures paddle rackets, and as part of that agreement, the influencer agrees to promote the manufacturer's products on their social media according to certain conditions. And with CoCounsel, you can quite easily extract information from long or complex documents, and in this instance, we can ask it, extract the key obligations of the ambassador under this agreement. And when we look through and dig deeper into the output, if I actually just go into footnote 2, we'll be able to identify the frequency and specifications the influencer needs to follow. If we look at compliance with guidelines, we can actually understand that the company can remove any and all posts under the terms of the agreement. And we can actually dig even deeper into communication and reporting. And this will tell us that the influencer must provide anonymized data on the social media engagement, and also must not post anything on political debate, among other things that we can see on the right hand side. So now that we've actually uncovered some of the information within this agreement, we can dig deeper and we can ask CoCounsel contextual or scenario-based questions. And in this case, the influencer we're in agreement with is struggling with writer's block and generating ideas for their social media obligations that we uncovered above. And they're a little bit worried about fulfilling their obligations. So what we can do is ask that contextual question. And I've done this here, and I've said to CoCounsel, under this agreement, if the ambassador produces only 3 social media posts in a week and 1 YouTube video that's 2 minutes long, are they at risk of the company terminating their contracts? And we can dig deeper into footnotes 1 and 2 again, where the influencer's obligations are to produce 5 paddle-themed social media posts on TikTok, YouTube, or Instagram, and any video on YouTube must be 3 minutes long. And if we actually look a little bit further down, we can see that CoCounsel has highlighted the termination clause and can actually identify that if the videos aren't completed, this constitutes a breach of material obligation, meaning that the company can terminate the agreement with immediate effect if our client fails to remedy that breach within 7 days. So what CoCounsel's done here, it's clearly outlined the obligations in this brand ambassador agreement initially, and then we've dug deeper to highlight that the influencer is at risk of termination of their contract. However, this is where we could report back to the influencer if we'd like, but our client, he's one of our trickier clients, so we have another scenario here as well. And for this scenario, we're looking into the Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Act 2024, which came into force in April. And we know as lawyers that it significantly bolstered consumer rights and tightened the law on unfair commercial practices. So let's imagine that our client started selling his own brand of paddle balls without consulting us as lawyers, and the balls are advertised through his social media channels. He offers to autograph each ball and gives a total price of $12.99 for a pack of 3. However, when the customer orders the balls on his website, they're presented with a non-optional price of £17.99 for the package, which includes postage and packaging and a ball signing fee. And we know that this is known as drip pricing and is going to give us some concern. So following that information of this kind of second scenario, I now want to do some research. And for legal research, we don't need to leave CoCounsel, as Westlaw's AI-assisted research and Practical Law Search and Summarize are integrated into the platform. And here we can see where I've asked CoCounsel using Practical Law under the DMCCA 2024, please summarize the provisions concerning drip pricing. And we can then dig into this Practical Law provided answer, and it will tell us that any invitation to purchase must feature a total price, which includes any non-optional costs of delivery and other non-optional charges such as booking fees. And if I actually want to dig deeper, I can click on these footnotes and get taken straight to Practical Law, so the source. I can dig deeper, or in this case, I actually want to follow up with a contextual question around that scenario I just outlined. And in this case, I've asked CoCounsel, if my client advertises paddle balls for £12.99, but when customers come to order them, the price is £17.99 because of postage and packaging and an autograph fee, would this breach these arrangements under the DMCCA? And CoCounsel will actually inform us that it would likely breach drip pricing provisions, citing total price. And again, if we want to dig deeper, we can look into some of the practice notes that have been provided, which link to Practical Law, or we can actually look into current developments of consumer law in the UK and EU. And this is really, I guess, a key feature of CoCounsel, how we can go from interrogating a contract, in this case, to then going straight to the legal research, to actually applying our scenario to the research, all in one place seamlessly. And from here, I actually just want to, ask one more question of our contract. And I've asked the influencer I've named, Johnny Astro, is he permitted to sell paddle balls under the agreement with Goliath above? And this is where we can find that conclusion at the bottom, again with footnotes that are sourced. We can see that we're told that based on the exclusivity and non-compete clauses, Johnny Astro is likely restricted from selling paddle balls. And at this stage, I actually just want to wrap everything up, hopefully right on time. I pull in the legal research from Practical Law and the extractions and draft an email to our client, Johnny Astro, with all of this information to then download with or without footnotes or copy and paste and share. So just wrapping that all up in one place. So that's all I was going to cover today. I don't know if there's any questions in the chat.
That's great. Thank you, Henry. And in light of time, I'm going to just do other people's real quick questions. We started 2 minutes late, so I'm going to overrun 2 minutes. So everyone saves their questions for the very last second. If everyone's okay to overrun, just really, not very long. So they said, people have said the webinar is invaluable. Thank you so much. I've posted a comment in the Q&A about could the panel comment on possible use cases for GenAI and legal marketing. It may be that we can come back to you on that specific one in light of time. But I think maybe the one to wrap up on is, what is the one big lesson you have learned that you would give to another firm who hasn't yet jumped on the hype train? I'd maybe take some umbrage with the word the hype train, but I think that might be a really nice way to wrap up. And any other questions that we haven't got to, we can post when we share this recording. But what's the one big lesson that you've learned?
That's for me, it's still about people, and that this is about adoption of technology, and this needs a lot of time and effort to make sure that you've got everybody on board that hype train. It's not something that you can just flick a switch on. You've got to work with the people, and that's communication.
Great.
Sorry to take myself on mute. So from my perspective, I suppose similar to Rob, it's about really committing to the program and understanding this is a seismic change to the way that you're doing things. And that's CoCounsel. I appreciate there's a whole other stack of GenAI and tools that you can be considering. But if you're really looking at this, you're going to change the way lawyers are working. Not for everything that they do. Some of it's very simple. But when you get to the more complex work like playbooks or, for example, due diligence reviews for corporates, you really have to sit down and extract from a lawyer's brain everything that they would normally consider, which they'll often tell you is really simple to do. But you've got to get them to really, really, map everything out. So I think it's not a new lesson, but I suppose it's one for people that are thinking about doing this seriously. You've got to commit to this or you will not get the value out of the technology. And maybe you're okay with that. Maybe you're going to scale it slowly and you're going to take that approach, but you've got to make that decision. What's your strategy before you start this?
Thank you, guys. And someone just said kudos to Henry for that demo, but cool, calm demo. And I would echo that. So thank you. Listen, it's exciting times, as we started out by saying. It's still early times for a lot of people. I think people should not be intimidated. And these conversations are so helpful. I hope everybody will join me in saying thank you to everybody on this panel for sharing your insights, your knowledge, and your journey so far. It's really valuable for me to try, as a journalist, trying to understand from the inside rather than just the innovation by press release that we sometimes see. So these conversations are invaluable. And I'd just like to say thank you so much to you all for taking the time to speak with me today. And thank you to everyone for listening in.
Thank you. Good fun.
Thanks, everyone.